The fluorescent lights of the supermarket buzzed overhead as I stood frozen in the produce section, my hand hovering over a bunch of cucumbers. A blonde woman in an elegant emerald dress was staring at me with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. Her blue eyes seemed to pierce through every wall I had carefully constructed around myself over the past 3 years. "We've met before," she said softly, her voice carrying a certainty that unsettled me. I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was mistaken, but something in her gaze told me she already knew the truth I had been running from. My name is Marcus Webb, and I had spent the last 3 years trying to disappear into the anonymity of a new city, a new job, a new life. The grocery store had become my sanctuary of normalcy, a place where I could pretend I was just another person buying vegetables and bread, not someone haunted by choices that had shattered lives. But now, standing in aisle 7 with this stranger who claimed we had met, I felt the carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. If you believe in the power of second chances, in the possibility that our past doesn't have to define our future, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that redemption is possible, no matter how far we've fallen. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know this message is reaching hearts around the world. "I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think you have me confused with someone else." I tried to move past her, my shopping basket feeling suddenly heavy in my hand, but she gently touched my arm. The contact sent a jolt through me, not of attraction, but of recognition. And then it hit me like a freight train. 3 years ago, the accident, the rain-slicked highway, the sound of screeching tires and breaking glass that still woke me up screaming in the middle of the night. "My name is Olivia Hartman," she said, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Hartman, the name that had haunted my dreams, whispered accusations in my nightmares, reminded me every single day of what I had taken from the world. "You were driving the car that night," she continued, her voice steady despite the tremor I could see in her hands. "The car that hit my husband." The grocery store seemed to tilt around me. The colorful displays of fruits and vegetables blurred into a nauseating kaleidoscope. I wanted to run, to disappear into the parking lot and never look back, but my legs wouldn't move. This was the moment I had feared and, in some twisted way, longed for during all these years of self-imposed exile. "I served my time," I said, the words coming out defensive and hollow. 18 months, I lost everything, my career, my family, my life. Even as I spoke, I heard how pathetic it sounded. 18 months for taking a man's life, for destroying a family, for making one terrible decision to check my phone while driving through that storm. Olivia's expression didn't change. She wasn't angry, wasn't crying, wasn't screaming at me the way I had imagined this confrontation would go 1,000 times in my head. Instead, she looked at me with something that resembled curiosity, maybe even compassion, and that somehow made it worse. "I know," she said simply. "I've known where you were for the past 6 months. I've been watching you, Marcus, trying to understand who you are now, not just who you were that night." The revelation should have terrified me, should have felt like a violation, but instead, I felt something else. Relief, perhaps. For 3 years, I had been living in fear of this moment, and now that it was here, the anticipation was finally over. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you watch me? Why are you here?" She glanced around the grocery store, seeming to realize for the first time that we were having this intensely personal conversation in the middle of a public place. An elderly woman pushed her cart past us, eyeing us with mild curiosity before moving on toward the dairy section. "Can we talk somewhere?" Olivia asked. "Really talk? There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here. I think we both need to sit down for this conversation." I should have said no. Every instinct of self-preservation I had developed over the past 3 years screamed at me to walk away, to maintain the distance between my present and my past. But I had been running for so long, and I was tired, bone deep, soul-weary, tired. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let me just pay for these." I looked down at my basket, realizing I had been shopping for dinner, as if this were just another ordinary Tuesday evening. 20 minutes later, we sat across from each other in a quiet corner of the coffee shop, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between us. Olivia had removed her jacket, and I could see she was thinner than in the photos I had seen during the trial, her cheekbones more pronounced, shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and grief that had carved itself into her very bones. "My husband's name was Robert," she began, and I flinched at the use of past tense, the finality of it. Everyone called him Rob. He was a high school teacher, taught history, and coached the debate team. He had this terrible habit of making puns that made everyone groan, and he couldn't cook to save his life. But he tried anyway because he knew I worked long hours at the hospital. Her voice was steady, but I could see her fingers trembling around her coffee cup. I sat there, forcing myself to listen, to not look away, to give her this much at least. This was my penance, to hear about the man whose life I had ended, to understand him as more than just a name on court documents and news articles. "We had been married for 7 years, Olivia continued. No children yet. We were waiting, wanted to travel first, wanted to be sure we were ready. He was driving home from a faculty meeting that night. It was supposed to be routine, just another Tuesday evening, and then—" She paused, taking a shaky breath. "And then you looked down at your phone for 5 seconds, and everything changed forever." The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. I loosened my collar, trying to breathe. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words inadequate, pathetic, but all I had. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't bring him back, but I need you to know that not a single day goes by that I don't think about it, not one day." She studied me for a long moment, her blue eyes searching my face for something I didn't know if I possessed. Truth, perhaps. Genuine remorse. Evidence that the man who had destroyed her life had learned something, changed somehow, become someone worthy of a second chance. "After Rob died, I fell apart," she said quietly. "I took a leave of absence from work. I couldn't function. I would stand in our kitchen and realize I was setting 2 plates on the table instead of 1. I would reach for my phone to text him something funny and remember that his number would never ring again. I was drowning in grief and anger, and I needed someone to blame. You had every right to blame me," I said. "It was my fault. All of it." "I know it was," she replied with a bluntness that stung. "But blame wasn't enough. Watching you go to prison wasn't enough. I thought it would give me closure, that seeing you sentenced would help me move forward, but it didn't. The anger just kept eating me alive from the inside out. I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone Rob wouldn't have recognized." She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn photograph, sliding it across the table to me. I picked it up with shaking hands. It showed a man with kind eyes and a warm smile, his arm around Olivia, both of them laughing at something off camera. They looked happy, unburdened, full of life and plans and tomorrows that would never come. I felt tears burn my eyes as I looked at Robert Hartman, really looked at him, saw him as a person and not just an abstract victim of my negligence. "6 months ago, I started seeing a therapist," Olivia said. "She suggested I might find peace if I learned to forgive. Not to forget, never to forget, but to forgive." I laughed at her, told her she was crazy, that some things are unforgivable. But she asked me to try something. She asked me to find out who you are now, to see you as a complete person, not just the man who killed my husband. "So you found me," I said, understanding dawning. "I hired a private investigator," she admitted. "It wasn't hard. You're not hiding very well, Marcus. And for the past 6 months, I've watched you. I've seen you volunteer at the community center on weekends, teaching kids to read. I've seen you donate half your paycheck to victims' organizations. I've watched you live a small, quiet life, never going out, never celebrating, carrying your guilt like a physical weight. And I realized something." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee, her hands steadier now. I realize that you're serving a life sentence, even though you're out of prison. You've made your whole existence a punishment, and I realize that your suffering doesn't bring Rob back. It doesn't make me feel better. It doesn't change what happened. All it does is create more pain in the world. I couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. Other patrons in the coffee shop were trying not to stare, but I didn't care. This moment, this conversation, was the most real thing that had happened to me in 3 years. "I'm not here to tell you that what you did is okay," Olivia said firmly. "It's not okay. It will never be okay. Rob is gone, and nothing can change that. But I'm here because I'm trying to learn how to live again, and I've realized that I can't do that while I'm consumed with hatred for you. And you can't move forward while you're drowning in self-hatred either." "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I'm saying that I forgive you, Marcus." The words hung in the air between us, impossible, miraculous. "Not because you deserve it, but because I need to. Because holding on to this anger is killing me as surely as that accident killed Rob. Because I believe that people can change, that mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define us forever." I put my head in my hands, my shoulders shaking with sobs I had held back for 3 years. The grief, the guilt, the shame, all of it came pouring out in that coffee shop while Olivia sat across from me, bearing witness to my breakdown with a quiet strength I couldn't comprehend. When I finally looked up, she was crying too, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "I don't know what to do with this," I admitted. "I don't know how to accept your forgiveness. I don't know if I even can." "That's not really up to you," she said gently. "I've given it freely. What you do with it is your choice. You can keep punishing yourself for the rest of your life, or you can try to honor Rob's memory by becoming someone who makes the world a little better, someone who ensures that his death meant something." We sat in silence for a long time after that, two people bound together by tragedy, trying to find a way forward through the darkness. Eventually, Olivia stood to leave. She placed her hand on mine briefly, a gesture of connection and closure. "I hope you find peace, Marcus," she said. "I really do. Because I'm choosing to believe that good can come from even the worst circumstances, that forgiveness is possible, that we can all be more than our worst moments." She walked out of the coffee shop, and I sat there alone, holding the photograph of Robert Hartman, looking into the eyes of a man I had never met but whose absence had defined my life. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than crushing guilt. I felt the smallest flicker of hope. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in the power of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption, please show your support by liking this video, sharing it with others who might need to hear this message, and leaving a comment below. Your engagement helps this story reach more people who might be struggling with their own guilt, their own need to forgive or be forgiven. Over the following weeks, something shifted inside me. I didn't stop volunteering or living quietly, but I began to do these things not as punishment, but as choice. I started attending support groups for people who had caused accidents, sharing my story, helping others navigate the impossible terrain of guilt and responsibility. I reached out to my family for the first time in years, tentatively rebuilding bridges I thought I had burned beyond repair. Please take a moment to leave a comment sharing your thoughts on forgiveness and second chances. Have you ever had to forgive the unforgivable? Have you sought forgiveness for something you thought was beyond redemption? 3 months after that encounter in the grocery store, I received a letter from Olivia. In it, she told me that she had returned to work at the hospital, that she was starting to re-engage with life, that she had even gone on a date, though it felt strange and disloyal, and she wasn't sure she was ready. She wrote that she thought Rob would want her to live, really live, not just exist in the shadow of his absence. She also told me that she had started a foundation in Rob's name, dedicated to promoting safe driving and supporting both victims of traffic accidents and those who had caused them. She asked if I would consider sharing my story, speaking to high school students about the consequences of distracted driving, turning my worst mistake into a lesson that might save lives. I said yes. Now, a year later, I stand in high school auditoriums and community centers telling my story. I talk about that rainy night, about the 5 seconds I looked away from the road, about the sound of the impact that still echoes in my nightmares. I talk about Robert Hartman, a man I never met but will carry with me for the rest of my life. I talk about Olivia's extraordinary act of forgiveness, not as something that absolved me, but as something that gave me permission to try to be better, to do better. I will never forget what I took from the world that night. I will always carry the weight of Robert's death, but I've learned that I have a choice in how I carry that weight. I can let it crush me, or I can let it motivate me to make sure that no one else has to experience what Olivia and I went through. The woman in the emerald dress who stopped me in the grocery aisle gave me something I thought was impossible. Not absolution, not erasure of my guilt, but a chance to transform tragedy into meaning, to honor a life lost by saving others, to prove that even our worst moments don't have to be our defining ones. And every time I speak to a room full of teenagers, every time I see someone put their phone down while driving, every time I hear from a parent whose child came home safely because they remembered my story, I think of Robert Hartman and hope that somehow, somewhere, he knows that his death wasn't meaningless, that something good grew from the ashes of that terrible night. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing love over hate, hope over despair, life over death. It's about believing that we are all more than our worst mistakes, that redemption is possible, that second chances are real. I still shop at that same grocery store. Sometimes I see Olivia there and we exchange small smiles, brief conversations, the connection between us both, a wound and a bridge. We will always be linked by tragedy, but we've chosen to let that link become something other than a chain dragging us both into darkness. She saved my life that day in the produce aisle, though not in any way I could have imagined. She saved it by showing me that carrying our guilt doesn't honor those we've hurt. What honors them is changing, growing, becoming someone who makes the world better, someone who ensures their loss wasn't in vain. That's what I'm trying to do now, every single day. Not because I've earned forgiveness, but because it was freely given, and the only way to honor that gift is to pass it forward, to be for others what Olivia was for me that day. A lifeline, a second chance. A reminder that we are all capable of more grace than we think.